Will is our associate producer, and she will also be translating, helping to translate with Yongbok.
Well, this is such an impressive work. I mean, I can't even believe to imagine how complicated the production design was. Can you perhaps walk us through a little bit of that? What did it entail in terms of like teams working in different places? I've never seen, even if I've worked in North Korean documentaries, I've never seen the kind of footage that you have here, like the archival of what's going on there. So can you tell us a little bit about how did you cast these nets and make this beautiful film possible?
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, this began. I was approached by our producers about doing a film on North Korea, and I went into a very deep dive into North Korea in terms of everything, propaganda, and I dove from every language, from every country. I discovered that I could find different things depending on what language I was searching in, what country I was searching from, and I discovered a couple things. I discovered a lot of, just insane tidbits of propaganda out of North Korea, but also this incredibly, mind-boggling undercover footage that was being shot by very brave, very determined North Koreans who were literally risking their lives to get the truth of their country out. And thirdly, I discovered that there's 26 million people in this country, and we have not had the opportunity to hear from any of them or even to acknowledge that they exist. And so the combination of sort of discovering the world of what they were taught, the world, the heartbeat of who they were, and the fact that we don't get to hear from them or even know they exist made me feel at a certain point, I have to make this movie. And that started me on a path that led me to Pastor Kim in South Korea. And many, many months later of him and I getting to know each other, we realized that we really wanted to make the same movie, which was to go in very deep and do something that brought us, face to face and made us acknowledge and recognize the 26 million people who have been living there for 70 plus years who have not been acknowledged. And Yongbok is one of them. So, yeah, that's how it happened.
And a question for you, Mama. Can you tell us a little bit about having a camera present, knowing that the documentary was being filmed, that you were in contact with the filmmakers through the very unsafe and difficult journey? Did that make you feel more vulnerable, or you felt like you had a bigger team on your side?
태국의 국가 마음의 여유는 조금, 그러니까 우리 북한에서 중국까지 올 때까지는 진짜 죽을지 살지 모르고 오다가 그래도 김승우 목사님을 만났을 때부터 그래도 등대 삼아 따라온 거예요.
So when we first fled North Korea, we had no idea what was going to happen to our lives. It's just like it was life and death until we met the broker that knew Pastor Kim.
우선 여기까지 오게 인도해 주신 하나님께 우선 영광 돌려요.
So I'm actually grateful to God or whatever being that made us come safely to South Korea.
우리가 거저 오자면 진짜 어디서 잡혀서 죽을지 모르고 또 우리가 이렇게 어느 노상에서 잡혀 돌아가기 때문에 잡혀서 돌아가면 정치범 수용소에 가기 때문에 일단 떠날 때 사이나 같은 거 먹고 죽자고 갖고 떠났거든요.
We left North Korea with nothing but cyanide pills because we knew that if we get captured, it will be death anyway. That was the only thing that we left North Korea with.
그런데 촬영진을 만나다 보니까 마음이 안전했어요.
But we felt safe once we got connected to Pastor Kim's network.
Can you talk about the relationship with the filming? Maybe you can also explain to us Was there a camera in place already when they started the journey of North
No,
Korea?
so the royal family, as you saw in the film, heard in North Korea that they were on a list, a banishment list, which is essentially it's a death sentence of sorts. I mean, you are sent into the high mountains of North Korea with basically nothing. You survive or you don't, and you basically do not survive. They fled over the river before we ever knew anything about them, into China, onto Chiangmai Mountain, not knowing anything about the outside world, not knowing anything about China, and roamed around for 5+ days, and then happened upon a farmer, as Yongbok said, who happened to know someone, who contacted Pastor Kim, because they were a part of the network. At that point, Pastor Kim and I had already decided to work together. We were following Pastor Kim, and the 2 stories we follow in the film are the 2 stories who contacted Pastor Kim after we started, following him. In terms of the cameras, the crazy thing about this, and my producers nearly wanted to kill me, especially one of them, but we had to, when Pastor Kim and I decided to do this, and knew that the film we wanted to make, we also knew that we were making a film, we were risking the fact that we may not have a film, because I wanted to make sure that we had absolute consent, obviously. When the family runs over the river from North Korea, they have no concept of what a film is. They cannot possibly give accurate consent. When Huk Chang, Yongbok's brother, talked to Pastor Kim and gave initial consent for shooting, that is nothing unusual, because the Underground Railroad always shoots their escapes. They use it as a means of footage to take into or smuggle into North Korea to try to educate North Korea about the outside world. So that was nothing unusual, but in terms of this being a film, we had basically no consent until the royal family, thank God, got to South Korea and were able to evaluate and decide whether or not they wanted to give consent. Likewise with Soyeon, the mother in the film, because I was shooting with her up until literally weeks before we premiered at Sundance, because we were trying to get accurate information out of North Korea about her son, and it's extremely difficult to do so. I wanted to make sure that she was able to, even at the last moment, decide, I don't want this in the film. Wow. So I had alternate edits. I edited the film as well. Alternate versions of the film, edits of the film. So everything was, we were like, and that was the crazy thing, that one of my producers in particular was like, what are you talking about? The only way to possibly make a movie like this, because it has never been made about North Koreans, and it's fucking outrageous that it hasn't, like that we have not given voice to them, was to make a movie where we risked maybe not having a movie at the end. But there was no other way to do it. So we had to take that risk.
It's extremely well edited. And it's like, it sees like an action film almost, which is crazy considering the conditions that you were shooting under. Yeah, I have more questions. Perhaps you do too. So yes, please, sir, go ahead.
I still don't understand who shot the footage as they're going over the mountain, as you're crossing the river. Is that your DP? Is that someone that Pastor Kim? Who was it?
Yeah. So this was a huge thing throughout, right? I mean, every country, every situation was different. Okay.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Oh, sorry. The question is, who shot the footage as the family were going over the mountain, as they were crossing the river? In China, none of us went to China. We weren't. The whole idea of this, and the whole goal, the whole purpose of this, was to document an attempted escape without putting more attention than, obviously the family were at risk. If they were caught in China, as Yongbok says, they would have been repatriated, and that would have been the end, and they had cyanide pills, in case that happened, right? So the whole idea was to do this, or not the idea, the mandate was to do this in a way that we did not put any extra attention. So in China, obviously we were not going to be there. Pastor Kim has, he's a pastor. He made a promise to his God 23 years ago that he would not only devote his life to help North Koreans, but that he would go with them every step of the way. In 2009, he was imprisoned in China, and he was flatly warned by the contacts in the Chinese police that if he ever came back into China again, he would be kidnapped into North Korea and killed. So in 2009, starting in 2009, he was not able to go to China, but he kept his promise to go everywhere else, including dangerous countries like Vietnam and Laos. In terms of the shooting, because none of us, including Pastor Kim, were going to go into China. China was only the Underground Railroad. It was only the hidden camera, the cameras that had been hidden along the border of North Korea and China for 20 years, that these brave North Koreans are smuggling into China and that the Underground Railroad is using along their path. Also, Hak Chang, the brother, Yongbok's brother, who did travel with his family for part of China, he shot some of that. We were able to go into Vietnam and shoot. We were able to go into Laos and shoot, and we were able to go to the border of Thailand and Laos and shoot. But on the boat, we were on the river side on Laos, looking at Thailand. On the boat, it was Pastor Kim. He was on the boat. He wasn't shooting, but he was on the boat because he made this promise, even though he has been, shot at on that boat in the past across the Mekong, terrified of doing this. But he made that promise. He feels he has to do it. On the boat, it was his lead broker was shooting, and then we were shooting the wide shots from the Laos side of the border. So it was a combination. Like, we were shooting in Vietnam, we were shooting in Laos, we were shooting on the border of Thailand, we were obviously shooting everything in South Korea. In China, it was only the Underground Railroad.
There's another question there? Yes.
So I have a question for you. First of all, the film was incredible. I was blown away by the footage that was in it and the stories that were told and the vulnerabilities of everyone that was involved. Pastor Kim is just such an insane human being and a superhuman, I guess you could say. How did you find contact with Pastor Kim? And you said that you were on the same page about this film and that he was also hoping to create a film like this. What do you mean by that? When you first approached him about the film, what was his reaction? Because ultimately what he's doing is a very risky job. And also the people are being vulnerable by being with him. And I just want to say one thing to Mamaro in Korean. 뉴욕에 오신 걸 환영하고요.
Welcome to New York.
가족과 강을 넘고 산을 넘고 그 용기 정말 박수 쳐드리고 싶고요. 정말 감동이었습니다. 감사합니다.
실제 우리 이렇게 오게 된 거는 김성훈 목사님의 영웅이에요.
맞아요.
네.
She said Pastor Kim is the hero. That's why she's here.
Yeah, I mean, that's why we're all here, really. So, yes, I was shooting initially with Hyun-seo Lee in South Korea. It was, initially, actually, I was shooting kind of a different movie. It was a thriller, but it was more like a dark psychological thriller of what it meant to be, at the time, the most high-profile defector out of North Korea. She was a target of the regime. It was a very deep, dark, and I have all that footage. Amazing film. But anyway, but Hyun-seo knew all along that when I done that research, I felt like we need something experiential. Like, I want to do something where people can't turn away, because we have turned away for 70 plus years, right? So she knew that. I was brainstorming with her. She was totally on board with that. And I think it was the second or third trip to Seoul when I read an article actually about Pastor Kim. And I sought him out. And ironically, it turns out that when I initially did research and had dug so deep into the internet and had found this, hidden camera footage out of North Korea, some of the footage I was finding was actually smuggled out by his network, but I had no idea at the time. So It was like this kind of confluence of things. Anyway, I sought him out. It took many months for he and I to get to know each other and to trust each other. He had been approached by many filmmakers. He had actually gone down some paths with different certain networks, had not great experiences, for whatever reason. And so it was many months of us getting to know each other, but what we discovered in that was that, yes, we both felt like the only way to do this is to really try to crack open not only the reality of North Korea to the North Korean people, but to actually put us in the shoes of the North Koreans who are trying to escape. And so he was, without him, honestly, he became our main line producer, honestly. Like, we were shooting on the border of North Korea and China. I mean, that's a place that nobody goes and nobody wants to go, and it's one of the most dangerous places in the world. It was only possible because of his network, So he was, as Yongbok says, I mean, he's an unbelievable guy. I mean, he has a serious commitment to this that he has committed to for the past 23 years, and he has not stopped, even in spite of the constant pain he's in, just all the difficulties that he goes through.
Question there?
Hi, I just wanted to say that was an absolutely extraordinary film. I had a question for Yongbok. Now you're here in the United States, what's your impression of the country and how does it compare to the United States you knew about when you were growing up in North Korea?
우리는 늘 미국 사람을 미국 놈이라 합니다.
So we've always called the Americans American bastards.
미국 놈이 너무 사랑스러워서 감동입니다.
But I am so amazed how incredible American bastards are.
밖에 질지 우리는 이렇게 교육을 하는 게 북한에서는 미국에 가면 이 군대가 이렇게 정을 지고 막 기계는 맨 군대에 이렇게 정진 것만 본다고 생각했거든요.
So I've been told that when you go to the United States, there's going to be all these military soldiers with all these guns and everywhere. So literally, while I was walking around Times Square, was asking you, where are the army? Where are the soldiers? Where are the guns? Literally, just yesterday.
그런데 어제 저 자유의 신상을 봤는데 거기에 우리 탈북민도 북한 사람들은 좀 다 그 앞에 이 햇불집 밑에 다 모여왔으면 하는 생각이 들더라고요.
So I went to Statue of Liberty yesterday, and I was overwhelmed, and I was hoping that one day maybe the North Koreans can come and be welcomed here.
자유가 넘치는 게 너무 부러워요.
I am so envious that this country there's so much freedom here.
여러분들이 여기서 태어난 게 영광이라고 생각하고 축복이라고 생각해요.
Please know that the fact that you're born in here, in this country, is blessing.
감사합니다.
Thank you.
We have time for one last question all the way in the back, please.
So who maintains the hidden cameras? Is it a group of people? How, you said they've been there for about 20 years. How is that kept going?
So the hidden camera footage from inside North Korea is shot by North Koreans. And they're basically smuggling, flip phones into the country. And there are a few different NGOs, groups that are facilitating that, or helping to provide those flip phones. But one of the main ones, and this is something I found out after I'd seen the footage, was Pastor Kim's network. I mean, they keep cameras, they're flip phones, but cameras, hidden along the border of North Korea and China. That's a more than 800-mile border, river border, all along that border. Okay, and through the network, they are made available for North Koreans who want to smuggle that in, shoot the footage of real life, because what we see on the TV is the missiles and the parades and what the Kim regime wants us to see. We do not see the real life. So these are people who want us to see the real life. They shoot it, and then they smuggle it back out. And there are some other organizations. One of the main ones who we worked with was someone in Japan. He doesn't actually smuggle cameras in anymore, but he did smuggle. He started during the famine in the 90s, and we used some of his footage. And he had cameras going in for about 20 years. So that footage is smuggled back out, and it's in basically the libraries of these different organizations that are providing the flip phones or whatever. But the whole idea, I mean, there's a big movement, and there has been, and it's increasing now, even the last few days. North Korea is going crazy because South Korea is, during the moon, in 2020, the moon administration in South Korea made it suddenly illegal to try to get any information inside North Korea because they were placating the North Korean government. Thank God the administration now is going up against that. So there are a lot of organizations in South Korea, and also many of them are run by defectors who are trying, their main goal is to get information into North Korea and information out of North Korea. And the idea is to educate, to sort of like open the eyes of North Koreans to realize like, no, we actually don't live in the best place in the world, right? Because people in North Korea, even though their life is hard, they're told that the rest of the world is even worse off. So getting information in is a huge thing, and getting information out is a huge thing. And so it's, there are many different groups involved. There are USB flash drives that are going in, there's cameras that are going in, there's balloons that are being sent in. So it's a multifaceted thing, but the idea is to get the people inside North Korea to realize, to have a sense of entitlement, like we deserve something more. You know?
Do you have time for one last question? Or
Yes. Yeah.
yes. Okay. So okay, then, who had it first? Decide.
I'm just curious, shooting with the mother who's just receiving news about her son. I mean, it seemed like a lot of that was shot, at least like, I mean, while she's getting the call, what does that look like? Not only as a director, but kind of like having a relationship with that kind of person.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's been one of the most difficult things I've ever experienced, and obviously it pales in comparison to her. You know, we were shooting with Soyeon, as I said, right up until a few weeks before we premiered. And we're, you know, Soyeon has been here most of the last 2.5 months. She has really, I mean, she was an activist in South Korea before we ever met her. She was mostly speaking out against violence against women inside North Korea in the military because she was a member of the military and she had experienced that. Now she has been really reactivated as an activist about her son. And so she has been here, you know, protesting against the, you know, outside of the Chinese embassy, because if China changed their repatriation policy, everything inside North Korea would change, right? So she's been protesting against the Chinese government. She's written a letter to the North Korean regime. She has been like in DC, in New York, in Boston, and California. But shooting with her, yeah, I mean, we were shooting with her before COVID and during COVID, and it was excruciating. Excruciating. I can't even. And the sad thing is, like, that is way more common than the Rowe family. Because most people who leave North Korea do not come as a family of 5. They come as one person, maybe 2, and they're leaving family behind. And if your family does not live right near the river and right near the border of China, and does not have the money to pay a broker to maybe make a fucking, you know, 1-minute phone call once a year, you will probably never hear from your family again. You will probably never know if your family is alive again. And that is way more the case. And so the Rowe family are so extremely lucky, and Soyeon is so heartbreakingly unlucky, but she is also way more of the norm. And that is the sad thing, and that is why we have to change this.
But to leave this in a slightly uplifting
Oh yes,
note.
no, sorry.
We've been traveling with
Yeah.
Soyeon in various film festivals. I just traveled with her to London and Toronto and
Yeah.
whatnot. And she still holds out hope, and she became such an activist because she wants to make sure that this does not happen to other people. And she also holds out hope that she can reunite with her son one day,
Yeah.
right? So it's a really, and she's also extremely touched by people's response. Like after a film screening like this, when she's here, you can't even imagine people line up and they hold her, they hug her, they cry, they hold her hands, they literally come up to her and say, we don't speak your language, we don't listen to, we're not of the same culture, same country, I don't, but I'm a mother. And I feel you, and literally, I have to hold your hands. May I hug you? May I do? And she feels other people's empathy towards her, and she's so energized by that. So she's so overwhelmed by this incredible reception that she's getting, and that's one. And then she still holds out hope that one day she can reunite with her son. And as she say, you know, how often do we hear this from that, right, Madeleine? How do we? every Q&A she ends with the fact that she says like you guys, like you spend time with your loved ones, like if it's no big deal. She just wants to have a normal day. And she says, I just want to have a meal with my son. That's all I hope for. And I'm just, so I just want to end with this, at least with that note that she's been overwhelmed by the enthusiastic response that she's been getting. And she's really motivated by activists, like she wants to make sure this doesn't happen to other families. And she still holds out a hope that she can reunite with her son.
And there is a lot of movement and pressure right now in China and North Korea. So that's what we all have to do.
Can you tell us why Mama Ro is here now in America?
Yeah, that's a good. Yeah.
Maybe Sue.
Yeah. So Mama Ro is here because we have. Right now we had 2,600, there are thousands, there are a lot of North Koreans that are in China, but there were 2,600 North Koreans that are sitting inside Chinese prison. They were not, during the COVID years, North Koreans were not, they closed the border with China, so there was nobody coming back. Now that the border has been opened, China forcibly sent back some 600 North Korean escapees like her, they were sitting in prison, back to North Korea,
including a family
knowing
member.
what fate awaits them, right? So there's still some 2,000 other North Koreans that are sitting in Chinese prison. So she's here. She just went to United Nations. She went to Washington. She met with the State Department. She met with Julie Turner, who is a human rights envoy. A U.S. human rights envoy. She testified. She was in front of U.S. Congress. Imagine she just defected. You just saw this film with her. She's in the United States protesting against China's policy of repatriating North Koreans back to North Korea. Isn't this just remarkable? But this is why she's here.
감사합니다. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming.